Todd and I met almost exactly 1 year ago at a mental health event where he openly shared his journey from the stage. He's a mental health advocate, suicide attempt survivor, in recovery from addiction, speaker, author, and host of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Thank you. It's lovely to see you again. And at that exact same event a year ago, this year you were speaking at it, and so that was very exciting to
Right? It
be.
seems like we keep, we're like little in a pinball game or something where we keep literally bumping into each other at these mental health events. So clearly
Yeah,
it's, I really believe in the universe. When you meet people, it's for a reason.
it's a reason, a season, or a lifetime. I've been told,
Yes. Or a lesson
or
somewhere in
maybe
there.
you
I
might have
have a
told
few
me that.
lesson people,
Well, yeah, that too. Yeah, sure.
right?
Hmm.
So we're having this chat because you've had a long journey with mental health. How long does that go back and when did things start?
Oh boy. This could be a 3 hour episode if we wanted it to be, but it actually started in grade five. I was diagnosed with a stomach ulcer. Um, and I mean, when you're grade five, most kids don't have, uh, stomach issues that like 80-year-old CEOs of billion-dollar companies have, right? Because they have so much anxiety and pressure and worry. But that is an ailment that kind of runs in my family. My grandfather had it, and my mom has issues, so nobody thought anything of it. So they treated me for, the physical part of it, but nobody really questioned why, was there anxiety? Why does he worry so much? And that was the thing. Like nobody called it anxiety when I was grade five. So I'm 46 years old, so that was almost 40 years ago. Um, so yeah, the word anxiety wasn't really a thing. It was like more like, oh, you worry too much, or my mom would call it a nervous stomach. So, it's the nervous boy. I love it's and I was like, no, it's called chronic anxiety, actually. So that's kind of when it started. And then in high school, I kind of was introduced to alcohol being in a small town. And well, I mean, I say that, but I mean, kids drink everywhere. Um, but that was very much the culture when I was that age in small town Saskatchewan. And a lot of my anxiety kind of, I don't know, it didn't go away, but I didn't worry about every little thing like I used to. Um, and then, yeah, out of high school, drinking turned into more and more. And there's a lot of addiction in my family, a lot of anger issues with the men. Um, a lot of my anxiety and depression eventually turned into anger. I was bouncing around from job to job. I was doing, I was, it's so weird. I've been discussing this lately, how life can be very polarizing, like at all times. So it's like some of these moments I look back and it's like, that was the darkest time of my life. But then I'm also like, oh, but I had so much fun too. So it's like, you can be miserable and happy at the same time. And it's hard to wrap your head around how that's possible. But uh, I don't know if it's like different frequencies, so they're not actually overlapping. They're actually just happening at the same time or something. So anyway, because yeah, I used to play in bands and stuff, and it was like, I mean, talk about like touring with a band and stuff. It is so much fun, but also so anxiety inducing, and you're drinking all the time, and you're calling home, and the girlfriend's crying and upset and missing you, and so it's like, yeah, yeah, it's very polarizing. So anyway, I had cool things like that going through my life, but also just everyday kind of schlub stuff. Band breaks up, and then you're doing just labor jobs for minimum wage. So then my anxiety, depression stuff kind of turns more into the anger. And I think I'd rather feel depressed than angry. I can't stand that feeling. I'd wake up angry and go to work angry just because I felt, I don't know, unfulfilled or something, or not satisfied with life. And the drop of a hat, I would just like be throwing stuff and smashing stuff. And And it's not a good look. I mean, I felt like a child having a temper tantrum. Like I've seen family members do it, and every time I'm just like, oh my God, this is so, one, scary for people. Two, just annoying. You just want to like shut up. You want, and then there I am doing it, and it's like, oh my God, I hate this. But eventually, I started drinking and using marijuana constantly. Um, and my issues came to a head. I had a suicide attempt. I tried going to the hospital once and was basically turned away, which is kind of a reason for when I started advocating, because I went to the ER and was turned away. Um, so then, yeah, eventually stuff came to a head again, and I ended up, I quit drinking, and that was huge for my anger and my depression. Still working through anxiety. Then COVID hit and more job bouncing around. Then eventually I was diagnosed with ADHD about a year ago. And so this fall I was working with EMDR therapists to maybe work through some of my trauma stuff. So yeah, it's basically lifelong, and there's always, anytime you peel off a layer, there's another layer there that you could definitely work on. And whether it's um, you use the same strategies or the same tools that you used before, or you need a different strategy like EMDR, or a different diagnosis like ADHD, a different medication, or a different perspective when it comes to therapies or different modalities. Um, I'm just trying to get through the day without letting these extreme polar feelings pull me one way or another, and just keep the balance, really. So yeah, it's a journey,
I have a question for you. I just want to circle back to something that you said.
definitely.
Um, in your opinion, do you
Hmm.
think that there is a connection between, I don't want to just say mental health, but let's say anxiety, just because
Hmm.
that's something you're familiar with. Do you think that there's an association, a link, a parallel between substance use, whether it's alcohol or drugs, and anxiety?
I do. I mean, of course, everybody's different, but when I worked, because I worked at the treatment center I went to after I quit drinking for a couple years, and I mean, it was quite obvious that uh, addiction is a comorbidity of not just anxiety, but like PTSD, um, bipolar, uh, different personality disorders, and really, an anxiety is just a symptom of a greater thing quite often too. Um, so yeah, I do think that substance abuse and anxiety, not only do they link, but they are a very common comorbidity of a lot of other bigger issues, including trauma. And I mean, trauma is also a huge uh, contributor to personality disorders and things. Um, so yeah, it actually drives me nuts a little bit that when we say mental health and addictions, I wish we could just get rid of the addictions part, because it is part of mental health. When I say mental health or mental illness, it includes addictions. Um, Someday it'd be nice to just drop that, but for people that maybe don't understand, I don't know, they're still separated for some reason.
Absolutely. I found, we were talking about this earlier before I hit record, that there, even in amongst our own stories, right? We are not just this one silo, this single aspect of mental health. I
Hmm.
really see mental health myself as a massive umbrella. And under that umbrella, there are a myriad of topics, including addictions, including grief, including so many things. Um, but you're right. And it just, the more I learn, and I feel like there's so much still to be learned, that trauma, my goodness, I think if we could all heal our traumas, we would probably be far better off. But it's, unfortunately, we live in this symptom fix the symptom kind of society, right? So we kind of
Hmm.
have to pick at the layers, as you say. We kind of maybe get a handle on one layer, and lo and behold, there's another layer to deal with. So interesting.
Hmm.
Um, so
I was,
for
I was going to say,
you,
sorry, I was going to say also, even with my ADHD, I feel like that's a huge contributor to my anxiety, depression, substance abuse. Maybe not the cause. Like I do think it caused those things, but also other things also contributed to those things. So it's very nuanced. It's all very complicated. There's no one treatment, one pill, one disorder, one diagnosis that's going to fix everything for me. Anyway, I'm finding that, um, yeah, that I think I have ADHD, but I also think I do have chronic anxiety on top of that. I also do think that DNA has something to do with it, and nature versus nurture. So yeah, like you were saying before, you throw spaghetti at the wall and you try different modalities and tools and things, and hopefully you figure out what's going to help you with that particular, I don't know, symptom or or whatever. You peel another layer off and you go, oh, okay, that's better now.
I
Moving on
think
to the next one.
exactly. And I'm certainly not an expert with a bunch of letters behind my name, but I do know that because we are all complex human beings and we are all learning so much more, that I think the key maybe is being open, right? Maybe we don't know what it is that we need or that what's going to quote unquote work. I don't know
Hmm.
that, we can be fixed as human beings as much as people try to fix us, but, to
Right.
cope better or to deal with the situation, whatever it looks like for us. But
Or change
I,
a belief system within yourself or
right, a
whatever. Yeah.
mindset shift, whatever you want to call it. But I think the key is being open. And like you say, to keep trying the things, even though you
Mhm.
might not think that it's your thing, like EMDR, man, game changer, game
Mhm.
changer. When I first read about what it was and what was entailed, I thought, this is insane. I come from a long history of working in the medical system. I'm research driven, I'm data focused, and that EMDR, just when I was reading about it, I thought, well, I'm not so sure about this. But it was one of the greatest things that I did for myself. And I cannot say enough about it.
And I tell people all the time, even if it's a placebo and it works, it worked. So
Exactly.
who gives a shit?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So tell us about a visit that you had that involved a 911 call.
Mm. Well, this was, so I'm getting so old. I'm like, it was like 8 years ago. And then it's like someone's like, no, that was like 12 years ago. It's like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. So I'm not sure how long ago it was. It was quite a while ago. It was, so this was really some of my darkest times. The year before, I had drove myself to the hospital in Regina, in the ER, asked for help. None was given. Um, and so I felt as a man in a small town prairie, like it was embarrassing for me as a man to go look for help for emotions. It was huge for me to go do that and then to be like told to go home. And basically, I was super embarrassed. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I just gotta suck it up here, I guess. Um, I was already on meds and kind of seeing a counselor, but still, it was embarrassing to me. So over the year, I was bad. I was a bad father. I was a bad husband. I was a bad employee. I was a bad son. Um, and I was using marijuana, drinking all the time. I was at a job I didn't wasn't finding fulfillment in, whether that was the job itself or just because I was in that frame of mind. And things came to a head one day, and I had a few drinks in me already. I wasn't like super drunk or anything. My wife said something that triggered me. I don't even remember what. I went into, I don't know if it's a psychotic episode or what, but it's like a dream slash I don't remember. I had people fill in some of the blanks, like even years later. But my wife said something, and I snapped, and I started like punching myself in the face. I started like slamming my head on the table, and I was like, it freaked her out. She grabbed our kids; they were little at the time. She went out the door, and while I was there by myself, apparently I just like put my head through the wall, and like I was slamming it as hard as I could against appliances and things. Like I was convinced in my mind that I just had ruined my life. My wife and kids are gone forever. Um, Over that year, I was not just had suicidal ideation. I mean, I was obsessed about it. Every night before bed, I was pushing knives against my throat and against my wrists, and I was doing really reckless behaviors at work that was like, dangerous. Not for other people, but for myself. When people ask if you had a plan, when doctors are assessing you, like, do you have a plan? Are you suicidal? Do you have a plan? It's like it didn't matter where I was during my day. I had places I could do things to take my life, right? I worked at the PFRA, the tree nursery in Indian Head. It was like, that's a great tree, mental note, I had tools in my shop. I was like at work. It was like, didn't matter where I was, I had a plan. So things really came to a head. Um, and yeah, I was basically slamming my head against stuff. And then my brother showed up. He was the one I had a couple beers with earlier, and my wife apparently went to his place and said, "What the hell were you guys doing? Like, you have to go help Todd. He's freaking out." And I pulled out a knife because I'd been practicing for a year, and this was it. And he tried to stop me, and I swung the knife at him, and then he jumped on top of me. He's a big dude, got on top of me and pinned me down. And apparently my sister was there too, and she's like trying to get me to smoke weed to calm down. Um, and someone called the ambulance or called 911. And next thing I know, there's three or four police officers in my dining room. They don't know what the hell's going on. They see a knife on the floor. They see a big guy on top of another guy, and like all hell breaks loose. Eventually, I'm screaming at them to shoot me. I'm begging them to kill me. I grab one of their guns. I didn't get it out of the holster, but I got my hand on one of their guns, and then things really escalated, and I had parts of my body that I didn't know had feelings that were hurting because of police are very good at detaining people. Let's put it that way. And yeah, they tied me up, and I just remember crying, like not sobbing. I mean, like scream crying, begging them to shoot me. And I remember saying, like, you're hurting me. I'm tired of hurting. Stop hurting me. I'm tired of hurting. Kill me, shoot me. Um, but anyway, they detained me and got me in their vehicle, and they took me to my local hospital here in Indian Head, which then they put me in an ambulance and took me to Regina, um, to the general hospital. And they finally admitted me into the hospital there. But I remember pulling up. It was almost a year to the day that I tried get going to the hospital on my own. And I thought, holy shit, like this is what it took to get into the hospital. This time I'm handcuffed to a gurney, strapped to a gurney with in an ambulance with two police officers on either side of me. Um, but anyway, I got there. I spent a couple weeks there. Uh, and I mean, I could write a whole TV series just about the 2 weeks being in there. And I learned something while I was in there. I learned that, you don't really get help in the hospital necessarily. It was a safe place for me to be to chill out for a couple of weeks till I was like got my wits about me again. And it did speed up the process to start seeing a psychiatrist because I was on like a year-long wait list, and once I got there, it was like instantly uh, you know, I'm I'm pushed up the wait list. So there was that, and it was the beginning, I guess, of my healing process, even though it still took probably 5 years of really, you know, dark moments. But um, so yeah. there were a couple kind of rock bottom moments after that, but that was kind of the major one that kind of got the ball rolling a bit. So that was scary.
Well, and what breaks my heart the most listening to that is that a situation so extreme is what it took for you to get some attention, medical, professional, whatever, all the attention.
Yeah.
How many people suffer in silence? Some people don't have these major breakdowns. That's terrifying that our system is so broken that it takes that much to finally get attention. And then what did your journey after that look like? Were you able to access a psychiatrist or a counselor? Did it tell us what that looked like?
So well, actually, while I was in there, twice AA came to my hospital room, and I was like, I I shooed them away because I was like, well, I'm crazy depressed. I'm not an alcoholic, you know. I have enough issues. I don't need to join a cult. So I shooed them away. Um, and the next few years, I mean, I was not thriving. What's the opposite? I was surviving, not thriving. Let's put it that way. I was just, going through the motions of my day to day. I kind of quit drinking on my own for a little bit, but I really upped my marijuana use because, as a stoner, you don't want to, it's like, it's good for you, man. It helps my anxiety, bro. It's like, I know different now, but it drives me nuts when I hear people say that. It's not even addicting, man. Um, and then, I run out of weed and I have a nervous breakdown 4 hours later. It's like, it's my anxiety. Well, yeah, I wonder why I have anxiety. Anyway, um, and then I think it was a couple years later. I did have another stint in the hospital about a year after that. I had a kind of a bad weekend. It was only a couple nights I spent in there. Um, doing my best. I'm self-employed. I I'm still, like I said, eventually I start drinking again. I'm drinking, I'm smoking weed every day. And then I see in the newspaper that the health region or health district or whatever the hell it was called back then, uh, they were laying off, I think it was like 20 some people from the general hospital, all from the psych ward. And I think it was something like 17 of them were psych nurses. And I thought, holy shit, like I was in there. I know how, I've seen how it operates and I've seen how often security is called.
Yeah.
At one point, security was called on me, and I ended up spending the night locked in a room with no bed. They just threw a mattress on the floor, and there was like cameras, and like I was like, security does not de-escalate things. Like the psych nurses are trained, you know. So, so anyway, I read this. I was like, how is this possible? And once in a while, anger, it's a good motivator. And I was so pissed off, not like emotionally dysregulated anger. I was like focused anger. I was like, this is bullshit. So I wrote I don't know, a letter or a blog. I don't know what I was doing. I just let my feelings out on, well, it's not paper. It was on a, on a keyboard. And I went through I basically told my story up to that point and how I thought, this is all BS and all this stuff. And I talked about my suicide attempt, which I'd never really done publicly, especially in a small town. And I don't even remember doing this, but I sent it to a bunch of different media outlets and I posted it on Facebook and stuff. And it blew up. It kind of went viral. Like I don't know how many tens of thousands of times that letter got shared. I saw it on uh, web pages like in the States and stuff, even. Like I'm like, what is going on? And the next day, like it was like all the news outlets from Regina came out to Indian Head to interview me and talk to me about the stuff. Um, so then I was kind of thrown into this advocacy role that I never thought was, I'd ever be doing. So then I felt like there was extra pressure on me now. It's like, oh, okay, I've got people's attention now. So let's keep this ball rolling and make some changes and make a difference. And within 2 months of having that pressure on me, Not that other people were doing it, but my own pressure. I was in the hospital again, and I woke my wife up extremely intoxicated, told her I was gonna harm myself and whatever. Um, and that night, I wrote something on my computer. I considered it kind of a suicide note, but it wasn't really a suicide note. Um, but again, a moment of clarity. I woke my wife up. Don't remember. I was so drunk. And that was the last night I drank, actually. I went to the small town hospital here in Indian Head. I had an amazing doctor in town at the time, and he basically convinced me to go to treatment and start going to AA and stuff. And so I detoxed in the hospital here for a few weeks, and that really started. Well, actually, okay, no, the other one started my journey. This was kind of mid journey now, but quitting drinking and quitting the marijuana and all that stuff, that was a huge thing. Like to this day, I have people reach out to me about a loved one they have, or even about themselves, and they're like, they're drinking, they're using, they're also depressed and all this stuff, and like, what do we treat first, the depression or the addiction? And I mean, like again, no two people are the same. For me, I had to get rid of that addiction before I could start healing uh, with about the anxiety and the depression and what was causing the depression and anxiety. And so that was the brown skin of the onion. I couldn't even get to layers until that big chunk came off first. Um, so yeah, I'm assuming most people are like that, but again, everybody's different.
Yeah, I think, that is not a road that I have traveled. However, being on the sidelines of observing, people in my life, I would say, I would say from what I have observed, purely
Hmm.
that I would concur with that. And so powerful. And it must be so difficult for loved ones, spouses. Like, how may I ask how your marriage got through these years? I mean, that's had to have been a massive strain.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was more than once where I wasn't sure we were gonna make it. Um, and I don't want to get too personal, but like I said, I was a bad husband, I was a bad father, I was a bad son, I was doing things that were against my own moral code. And then once you kind of like you have some moments of clarity, you're like, what am I doing? Like this is not me. So she was amazing. My wife was amazing. She after the first big stay at the hospital, um, I continued to see my psychiatrist and a counselor regularly. My wife knew somehow, she's just a very emotionally intelligent person. She knew that we couldn't work as a couple until she dealt with some stuff too. So whatever I was going through kind of triggered some stuff in her. So she saw someone separately to deal with issues, traumas and things she was dealing with. And then we would see someone together. So this was all happening at the same time. I was seeing my own person, she was seeing her own person, and then on separate days we would see someone as a couple. And I really do feel like we got married young. Like we've been together for over 20 years, and I really do feel like we grew up together, even though we didn't. We did know each other as children. We met when I was like 20 and she was 19 or something. But that we really grew up together, uh, going through that. Um, and then the next time when I was detoxing in the hospital, um, and I quit drinking that night, it was shortly after that um, that I kind of wanted to leave the hospital and come home. And she said, like, I can't watch you do this to yourself anymore. I love you too much, and I just can't watch anymore. And she was like, if you are coming home, like, just come home to get your things because I can't do this anymore. And I thought, oh shit, okay, this is this is affecting people more than I thought. So I ended up staying at the hospital and detoxing and going through the whole thing. And um, so yeah, it wasn't like she was the second time. It wasn't like she was mad or anything. I mean, I'm sure she was mad, um, but yeah, it was just to, she was protecting herself and the kids. She's like, we can't do this anymore. I can't watch you do this anymore. And, the kids are getting affected by it and they're going to have traumas and stuff. And, mm-mm, like,
Do you think
and
that that hard line in the sand from her, do you think that gave you a little nudge, a big nudge
absolutely.
maybe to, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And in addiction treatment, they're like, you're not doing this for other people. You're doing this for yourself. Um, and, I did have, it was kind of an ultimatum in a way, but also I was ready. Like I was so sick of it and I was just too scared. I was too scared to do it on my own. I didn't know how to I didn't know how to do it. Like I was terrified. I tried for so many attempts to quit and to heal and it was too scary so I quit. So generally I don't think ultimatums work unless the other person is ready. Like I was ready. I just needed that nudge. So um and I tell people all the time too that I think she had the harder end of the deal. Um, then I've had people say, no, you can't compare pain, you can't compare traumas, and you can't compare, which is true. But as a parent now, it's like, if my kids were going through it or my wife was going through the things I was going through, I don't know if I'd be able to stick around, like, or just the sleepless nights, the absolute helplessness that she must have felt. God, I can only imagine how scary and ugh, ugh. Yeah. So yeah,
Well, I'm glad that the two of you were able to work it through. I don't know the statistics, but marriage is hard enough on a good day, to have extra stressors on it and so on and so forth. I mean, you clearly worked as a team. So I'm really, really glad to hear that. For anybody
yeah.
who
Thank you.
might be listening, who, is maybe at their lowest point, struggling with either many of the aspects of mental health or addictions, what would be your advice to them?
Oh man, there's so many things because there's so many levels to it. For one, keep advocating for yourself because the system does suck, and even when you're doing what your doctor's orders and you think things are going well, keep want more, demand more, need get certain dates, get if whatever, like demand more, because I guarantee you, you're not. I feel bad saying this because everyone I've ever met that works in addictions and mental health and in the health authorities, they're all sweet, lovely people. But it's the system that sucks, and they know that. They even know that. So nothing against anyone that works in this field. It's just you have to demand more because the system will probably fail you at some point if you don't demand more. And I've seen it time and time again. And as far as we've come from my first suicide attempt to now, which has been about 12 years, it was only a year ago or a year and a half ago where that young guy was again told to leave the hospital. And an hour later, he's found floating in a lake. So it's still it's still happening. It's still not perfect. I know that there'll always be, you know, a certain percentage of people that get lost, but it's
Yeah.
still very frustrating. And the other thing is, uh, yeah, no one's gonna do it for you. No pill, no therapist is gonna fix you. You have to do the work. And that's the hardest part is taking that first step to actually start doing the work. It took my wife saying, leave. I can't, I can't be around you anymore to really start doing the work. I had seen a counselor for probably 2 or 3 years off and on. I wasn't doing anything. Like I would go to the counselor session, I'd come home and not do anything to ask me to do. I'd be taking the pills and then be going like, why aren't they fixing me? Why haven't you cured me yet? But yeah, you really, and it's hard. I mean, it's simple. What you have to do is simple, but it's hard. It's not easy. It's a very simple plan on paper, but executing it is extremely difficult. It's painful. It's terrible. You think of having a broken leg, like the trauma of the broken leg. you don't even feel it at the time. It's the healing, it's the pain, that journey of healing. It sucks. And then it gets itchy under the cast. And, there's all types of things. And then you have to go through rehabilitation and all this stuff. Like healing sucks. But if you don't do the work, I mean, you're just going to get gangrene and who knows what. Um, it's kind of a weird analogy, I guess, but it works. Uh, so yeah, it takes a lot of courage to heal. And yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people either don't get that nudge or they never, or, something tragic happens before they're able to get into the mindset of doing the work.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think you nailed it. Like there's no fairy godmother that's going to show up. No one is coming to save your butt. We've got to
yeah.
do the work ourselves. And you're absolutely right. It's simple, but far from easy.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I like to ask my guests on the podcast is what the word resilient means to you.
Mm. Uh, I just used this word the other day, and I don't know if I've ever really used this word to describe myself or anyone, other than like, Europe after World War II or something. But I used it the other day in a text to my wife. Uh, you know, Life is still hard, whether it's financial or we were watching loved ones being sick, and like you said, even on a good day, marriages can be hard. Um, so to me, resilience, when I think of the word resilience, I think of my wife and I think of our family. And I said, we've been resilient in the past and we're going to be resilient still. And we're going to get through this patch of, um, like it's not a relationship thing, but there's people around us that are suffering and, financially, and kids are graduating. So we're borderline empty nesting in a few months. So it's just a very transitional period in our lives right now for not just my wife and I, but for other people in our family. So when I think of resilience, I think of my wife and I, and I've never used that word to describe me or our relationship before. So it's kind of funny you use that word. You
When I,
asked me about that today.
well, when I started the podcast and I knew I wanted to focus on mental health, but I knew that I also wanted to focus on people like you who really, really are resilient. And it's just really interesting to me because I do ask every single guest that question.
Hmm.
Their answers are all varied, right? Because we're
Hmm.
all unique snowflakes, but they're all the same at the same time. And I just find it so interesting. And I think it's your story that makes you resilient, right? I did a talk just a couple weeks ago and I said, unfortunately, we can't even talk about resilience until we talk about adversity, right?
Hmm.
Because when we're
Hmm.
sitting on a beach eating cupcakes all day long and the unicorns are running by, we're not growing, right? We're not becoming resilient. That's almost the opposite of resilience. So unfortunately, it does take adversity to get resilience. And like I say, you are that person. And I am so proud of you, Todd. So proud
Oh,
of you for the work that you've done, for the advocacy work that you continue to do. We didn't even get to your book, but you've written a children's book, which I just
yeah,
think
where is it?
is just such a gift. It's such a hard topic to talk about. Yes,
What is it?
sometimes daddy cries. Tell
Eh,
us just real quickly about your book and who
sure.
it's for and where people can get a hold of it.
Well, actually, the night I quit drinking and I said I went to my computer and typed up a suicide note, it was actually the first draft of this book. So the night I quit drinking was the first draft of this book, and it was, it was very different. It was the first draft, but it's basically the perspective of a kid watching his father go through depression, anxiety, and stuff. So the father never actually says anything in the book. It's always a conversation with the kid and the mother explaining to him, that it's like having a stomach ache. You're not well, so you have to get help. Sometimes you need rest. Sometimes you need medicine. Sometimes you have to go to the hospital. So it's I I'm I'm for whatever reason, I have a hard time tooting my own horn. So, but it's one of the things I'm very, very proud of is that book. I think I've walked that fine line of making it realistic, but also not scary for kids. It's just, this is what, this is what it's like. Um, and kids do tend to understand physical things, so they can apply that to their emotions and to their mental health. Um, and yeah, it's gotten really, really great feedback from parents and from professionals. So yeah, I'm really proud of it.
Well, I think to me, the most important part is that it opens the door for conversation, right?
But
I
yeah.
mean, I am no parenting expert, but I do know that our kids don't necessarily learn from one conversation, right? It's
Hmm.
that constant revisiting topics, and a book for a small child is just a brilliant way to ease into it, open the door, make this a normalized part of conversations, right?
Exactly.
So it's
Yeah.
it's it's very, very brilliant, and I'm again just so grateful that you were able to find the space and the heart space really to write that. So if
Yeah.
people
Thank
want to
you.
get a hold of your book, is it
Hmm.
on Amazon?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. If you go on Amazon.ca or .com, it's on some other websites and stuff too. Yeah, sometimes daddy cries. I wanted to add real quick that something I didn't expect with the book was opening up that conversation with um, the mother and the father, because probably 99% of the people that bought the book are females. So it's the mother or the of the it's the mother of a child whose husband is suffering. So then, uh, um, because for whatever reason, men are just, I don't know what it is. Like, I talk about mental health all the time, and it's like 80% or 85% of my audience is female. And so it's like, I think men don't even know. It's the problem because they either are, drinking it away and or getting angry. They don't realize their anger is actually depression or anxiety or whatever. And so they don't even realize they're suffering. But
Yeah.
so anyway, that was a very interesting thing with the book was finding that it's
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, maybe we'll come back and we'll do another podcast another time. But I think you critters, you males, are absolute masters at a word I can never say, compartmentalization. It's a big word.
mm, hmm
And you just are able to put it somewhere, push it down. I mean, not effectively. You don't get bonus points for doing that, but it's something that I think men do.
You
And
said do do.
I read something or heard something that it's simple, right? We get better at what we do. So the more we
Yeah.
push down, the better we get at pushing it down. The more we
Mm.
talk about it, the better we get at talking about it. So, you know what? You are doing this world so much good by being a male voice, speaking to mental health. And I know that eventually things will change and more men will be opening up to this whole concept of doing the work. So I cannot thank you enough, Todd, for being here today, being vulnerable, sharing your story in such a raw and real way.
Well, thank you.
And
I
to
appreciate it.
our listeners, as always, be well and stay resilient, and we will catch you next time.